Hello everybody and welcome to this Farm Advisory Service webinar. My name is Siobhan MacDonald and I work for SAC in Inverness, and we're doing this on behalf of the Farm Advisory Service. I'm delighted to be joined by Mary and Kirsten, my colleagues, and we're going to explore the basics of nutrition for ruminants. We're concentrating on sucklers and sheep, but this applies to many ruminants. So Mary comes from a dairy farm, but she is one of SAC's nutritionists for beef and sheep. And Kirsten has many years of experience, many years of experience actually, and she heads up SAC's livestock team. So if you haven't used a webinar before, there's a few things to note whilst you're using it. So on the panel on the right hand side, it's a bit fidgety. It's the icons on it are a bit small and it is a wee bit difficult to use. But the main things to note are the hand button. So you can click on the hand and that means that you'd like to ask a question, and we can unmute you at the end and you can ask in person. But if not, if you want to type in your question, you'll see there's a chat box. So simply type your question into there and I'll be monitoring them throughout, and I'll gather all the questions together and we can ask Mary and Kirsten a bit later on. If we don't get to your questions at the end, then we'll get back to you after the webinar. So I'd like to hand over to Kirsten to start.
Thanks, Siobhan, and good evening, everybody. So tonight we're going to try and have basically a whistle-stop tour of nutrition. We're going to try and cover beef and sheep and do it all by 9 o'clock. So if we're going too fast, just put it into the comments box and we'll try and slow it down a bit. So tonight we're covering beef and sheep. Why nutrition, basically? Nutrition has such an impact on the whole production cycle of both beef and sheep. Everybody's got key goals to what your driver is, and it's how nutrition fits in with that driver and how sort of you can use what you learned tonight to then put into your own scenario or your own herd or your own flock. So everybody's goals are completely different. It might be some of those things that we've listed there. So we've got produce progeny every 365 days. A cow or a sheep is there to obviously be fertile, to breed, and nutrition has a massive impact onto that. Maintain condition score, again, it's a tool and it's a great way to actually see that your nutrition is working. So if you're condition scoring regularly, you'll soon actually get to see if you need to tweak anything, if you need to change any management at all. Having a healthy herd and flock, it's proven over and over again that the healthier the flock is, the better the immunity is. And of course, that all comes down to nutrition. Low mortality, keeping costs down, profitability, there could be an endless list there. The final one there I've put is mindset. And I think just now is obviously a very challenging time. We're all stuck at home, we're in lockdown, lambing is pretty much over. And it's just keeping positive and being able to look in a park and having the joyous look over lambs and yows or cows and calves and just everything looking like you want it to, and not looking at a park and there's problems. And quite often those problems come down to nutrition. You know, if it's if it's joint ill, then it tends to all come down to not enough colostrum and nutrition. So this is just really setting the scene of where we're going tonight. So I'm going to hand over to Mary now, and she's going to start about the rumen.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. So yeah, topics we wanted to cover this evening. First off, just how does the rumen work? Just giving a bit of an overview, background of the importance of some of the fundamentals behind what we're trying to achieve in nutrition. Some of the terms commonly used in nutrition. So I'm going to go through some of I think there's 4 that I'm going to go through, the top sort of terms that you'll come across or might have come across before. Then we'll move on to some feed labeling, how to evaluate a feed, what you want to look for when you're looking at a feed label, and then a bit on feed conversion as well at the end if we've got some time. So first off, how does the rumen work? So we've got this overview here. It's quite a simple diagram, but I like how it just lays out nice and simply. It shows all 4 compartments of the digestive system in a ruminant. At the top here, we've got the esophagus. That's where Just use my little spotlight. Hopefully you can see. Oh. Move my webcam out of the way. So this here is the esophagus. Hopefully you can see that spotlight that I'm just hovering over it there. This is where the food comes into the rumen. The rumen, as you can see, is the biggest part of the digestive system of the ruminant animal. So ruminants are your cattle, sheep, and deer as well, are ruminants. So this is the big fermentation vat that we call. This is where all the bugs are, and they actually digest the feed that the animal eats. So when we're talking about feeding a ruminant, we're really actually feeding the bugs in the ruminant animal. It's all about keeping these bugs happy. They're the ones that actually digest the feed and produce the energy and the protein that the animal eats, or doesn't eat, but takes in. So the energy is in the form of volatile fatty acids, and that's made by the bugs. And the bugs also make the microbial protein out of the feed that comes into the esophagus. There's a reticulum here as well. Quite often in nutrition, we look at the reticulum and rumen kind of as one big compartment. And then it moves on to the omasum. It's not overly known what its role is, but it's seen as a sort of filtration system, and it allows only the small particles to move from the rumen through into the abomasum. So this is the fourth compartment of the stomach of the ruminant, and this is what's known as the true stomach. So it's similar to our stomach, basically, to a monogastric animal like a pig or a chicken or us. And that's similar to how our stomach works, where the acids are produced and it breaks down as normal. The rumen, I've said up here, pH of 5.5 to 7. So if you think of water is a neutral pH of 7. So it is a fairly neutral pH. That's what the bugs like in the rumen. So when we're talking about our ration and keeping the bugs happy, we're trying to create a neutral pH, a good environment for the bugs to thrive, providing them with energy, protein, and also fiber in the diet as well. So fiber helps to keep these bugs happy. They digest fiber, but also it helps with saliva production. So saliva is produced whenever the animal actually ruminates, when they regurgitate the feed, chew the cud, and swallow it again. That also produces saliva and helps buffer this pH at that level of sort of 5.5 to 7. I'd say 5.5 is when it's maybe dipply. If a feed has gone in and it's digested, that can slightly dip the pH. And then we've got just the small intestine, large intestine, cecum and rectum. And move on to the next slide. This is an overview of what it actually looks like in a young animal. So this is in an animal that's newly born. In this top graph here, I've said for a calf, but similar for a lamb as well, you'll see that the rumen is only making up 25% of the digestive system up in this top left-hand diagram. And the abomasum, or the true stomach, makes up most of its digestive system at this point. This esophageal groove, this is a sort of shunt that basically closes off the rumen and makes sure all the milk goes straight to the abomasum. I've shown a little picture of a calf here that's suckling. It's that suckle reflex that causes that shunt to keep the milk from going into the rumen, because you don't want it going into the rumen and fermenting, and it will basically rot. So it goes straight to the true stomach, or the abomasum. So effectively at birth, as I said there, it's basically a monogastric animal at that point. Once you get to adulthood, or once the calf starts to take in solid feeds, that's when the rumen starts to develop, and you can see that at that point the rumen's making up about 70% of the digestive system at that point, and the abomasum is only about 15%. So quite a difference from a newborn animal to adult. I'll pass over to Kirsten to let her explain the graph at the bottom here.
Thanks, Mary. So the graph down in the bottom right-hand side, that's just really showing it as a sheep. So Mary's spoken about a calf, which is same type of thing again. But you can see here in the red line, you've got yow milk, and in the green line, you've got lamb intake. At the bottom, it's showing the weeks from birth. So basically, we're showing here that at about 3 weeks, that's when the yow's peak milk yield is. And then after that, you see the red line is actually tailing off. So the lamb then is taking a lot more from pasture. So really for that first 3 weeks is where you've got that shunt that Mary's speaking about. There's no real need for the rumen, there's no real need for the regurgitation and everything else that happens. So as time develops, then you can, I think that graph just kind of shows it quite nicely. So you've got your yow milk at 3 weeks, your lamb intake then is just taking a steep increase after that 3 weeks. So that's the extra amount that's coming in from pasture. By 6 weeks, you can see there's kind of arrows, and it's almost shown there that it's 50-50, the amount that's taken from milk and the amount that's taken from pasture. So it's quite a gradual increase that of the kind of changeover of what's happening inside of the animal. But it's just thought it's giving you a kind of graph form just so you can kind of understand a bit easier why that kind of shunt is happening and what's happening in young animals.
Thanks, Kirsten. So moving on to terms that are commonly used in nutrition, there's 4 that I was going to cover. So they are dry matter, metabolizable energy, predicted intake, and crude protein. So I'll go into each of these ones, and then I'll give a bit of time for questions if anyone has any after. So the first one is dry matter. So dry matter is the feed content minus water. So the water content of feeds is incredibly variable. I've said there from around 6 to 90% if you're comparing something like a root crop like Swedes to concentrates. So it makes feeds more comparable by doing them on a dry matter basis. I've put a picture down there at the bottom with grass with sort of dew on it, so it's quite a wet grass, fresh grass, versus barley on the other side. If I was to compare these on a fresh weight basis, the grass might not look so good on fresh weight, but actually on a dry matter basis, we know that grass does provide a lot of energy and protein. So yeah, it makes feeds much more comparable whenever we look at them. So in nutrition for ruminants, we always look at everything on a dry matter basis, and then we convert it back at the end to actually what's being fed to the animal in front of them. So I put 2 examples here of 2 different feeds with very different dry matters. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see a hay of 85% dry matter, or the equivalent of water content of 15%. So that's a very dry feed that's not got a lot of water in it. Compared to, on my right-hand side, I've got Swedes at 10.5% dry matter, or water content of 89.5%. So again, a massive difference in how much water between the 2. The next term that I'm going to explain is metabolizable energy. It might have been something you've heard of before. Quite often just use the acronym of ME, but this is what metabolizable energy is. It's the system that we use in the UK. I put this little flow chart in just hopefully break it down into the different components and make it a bit more clear of what we actually mean. So the gross energy here at the top is basically all the energy that's available in that feed. But once the cow takes that in, or sheep takes that in, a lot of that will be lost from feces and urine and methane, and that's what you're left with is the metabolizable energy. So basically, after she's pooped, peed, and burped, you're left with the metabolizable energy. That's the easiest way to describe it. I've got these other terms as well. You don't need to worry about them. Different systems use different things, like horses work on digestible energy, but in ruminants we look at the metabolizable energy, or ME. So after she's pooped, peed, and burped, that's what you're left with. So it's the supply of energy that the animal actually uses. We talk about it, its units are in megajoules. Some people can get a bit confused by what's metabolizable energy and megajoules. The megajoules are just the units that we use to describe metabolizable energy. So the way we talk about calories in human nutrition, I've put here that to put this into the equivalent of calories, 1 megajoule is equal to 240 kilocalories. Whenever we talk about in human nutrition that women require, I think it's 2,000 calories a day, it's the same sort of idea in ruminants that we're looking at. For example, a dry suckler cow, how many megajoules of metabolizable energy does she need to maintain herself every day? We express it in terms of megajoules per kilogram of dry matter. Just wanted to put that in to link it back to the dry matter contents. So everything on a feed label or in an ingredient, like for example, barley, or if you look at a silage analysis, that will all be quoted in megajoules per kilogram of dry matter. So how many megajoules of energy will I find in a kilogram of barley dry matter, for example? That's how it will be expressed. So we have some poll questions. I'm hoping this is going to work. The first question is, which of these has the equivalent of 1 megajoule or 240 calories? Is it A, a Cadbury's 42-gram chocolate bar, so just a small Cadbury's chocolate bar, a pack of Starburst, or a bag of Wotsits? Right, I'll put the poll up in a minute, which will let you vote, but just a disclaimer, when we were practicing this, it should minimize your screen automatically, but if it doesn't minimize your screen, if you hit the escape button on your keyboard, that'll take you out of full screen and it will let you click on an answer. So if you're getting frustrated that it's not letting you click an answer, you might just have to minimize your screen, and then once the poll's finished, you can maximize it again. So I'm just going to launch the poll now, and we'll see what everyone thinks. So it should be appearing on your screen now. Which of these is the equivalent of 1 megajoule or 240 calories? Cadbury's chocolate bar, Starburst, or a bag of Wotsits? As I said, if you're having any issues, just hit escape to minimize your screen and it should let you vote. It's quite exciting watching the answers come in. I will show you in a minute. I'll just give it a few more seconds, let everyone have a chance to vote. So I think that's maybe the majority in now. I'll maybe just close that, unless Siobhan shouts at me. And then I'm going to share the results. Hopefully that will appear on everyone's screen. And the majority went for a Cadbury's chocolate bar, which was right. 53% of you were correct. It was a Cadbury's chocolate bar. 27% went for Starburst. Close, very close. The other two actually were very close, I have to admit. So that was a tricky one. Well done. Thank you for participating. I'm gonna hide that poll now. Do have another quick poll question. This one is looking at how much energy do you think a dry 650 kilo beef cow needs to maintain her weight on a daily basis? As I said, for women, it's about 2,000 calories. What do you think a 650 kilo beef cow needs to maintain her weight on a daily basis? Is it A, 150 megajoules, B, 75 megajoules, C, 90 megajoules, or D, 50 megajoules? So I'm going to launch this poll again. Hopefully that will appear on your screens now. So if you can vote, as I said, if you're having any issues again, you might just need to minimize your screen. But it seems to be working for people. I'm seeing some answers. That's good. Let's give it a few more seconds. let anyone else vote. Okay, I think that's most people have come back now. I'm just going to close that poll and share the results again. Hopefully you'll see that on your screen. So the majority this time went for 90 megajoules. Just over half of you went for 90 megajoules. 25% of you went for 75 megajoules and 20% went for 150, and very few went for 50 megajoules. So the answer was B, 75 megajoules. So round of applause to the 25% that got 75 megajoules. The good guess though for 90. I'm going to hide that again and then pass to Kirsten, who's going to, that'll hide, yep. Going to pass to Kirsten, who'll explain a nice little rule of thumb for how you can work out energy for maintenance.
So we're using a 650 kilo cow on that last one there. And in the screen, we have a small hill cow, so we're a cow that's probably about 650 kilos there. And just trying to work out how much energy they actually need. And it's so simple to do. And it's something that once you hear it once, it will stay in your head. So it's a really nice, simple one. And you just basically take what the cow weight is, because depending if she's a blue-grey cow like that, she's obviously smaller, she's not going to have the same energy requirement. If you've got a continental cow, so a Limousin, a Charolais, you know, a bigger cow, a 950 say kilo cow, then she's going to need a lot more energy to do all our processes. So we say we stick with our 650 kilo cow like we did in our little quiz there, the types of cow that we've got there. So her weight, 650, we know that. So what all we do there is take 10% of her body weight. So that takes us to 65, and then we add on 10 megajoules. So it's just taking 10% of the weight, so 650 down to 65 plus 10 megajoules. If the cow is going to be outwintered, so say it's a hill cow like that one there, you just add on another 15% to allow for outwintering. So that's given her a lot more kind of resources for getting through the harsh weather. If she needs to, you know, defend against a cold night or anything like that, we just add on the 15. So it's really simple to do, and something that you can easily remember afterwards.
Thanks, Kirsten. So moving back to that example again, what does that actually look like in practice? So I said it was 75, or as Kirsten explained, it was 75 megajoules for 650 kilo cow, but what does that actually look like in terms of how much silage would she need to eat? So I've said, for example, if I had a silage of 10 megajoules of ME, so that's something I would find out from a silage analysis. I've just taken an average for silage of 10 megajoules and a 25% dry matter. Again, that's something you would find on your silage analysis report. It tends to be near the top, but I've used an average of 25%. So at that level, she would need to eat. For step 1, I worked out how much she would actually need to eat on a dry matter basis. So I've done 75 megajoules, which is how much she needs in energy, divided by 10, which is how much energy per kilogram of dry matter you get from the silage. So 75 divided by 10 is equal to 7.5 kilos of dry matter. Whenever we give out a ration to a farmer or a crofter, you wouldn't give them it on a dry matter basis, so you have to convert it back to fresh weight. So how much will actually she need to eat in front of her? So when I convert that into what's actually set in front of her, it's that 7.5, so taking that from my 7.5 kilos of dry matter, multiplied by 100, divided by the 25%, that's the dry matter of the silage, divided by 25%, and that's equal to 30 kilos of silage. So she needs to eat 30 kilos of silage in order to get 75 megajoules of energy. Now I've just used average figures for silage, but hopefully it gives you a rough idea. And it'll depend on your silage, how much you'll need to eat. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was predicted intake. On a software rationing program, we use more fancy prediction intakes, but as a good rough rule of thumb, or back of the fag packet type rations, 1.5% of body weight is the predicted dry matter intake of a dry beef cow. So in this example, for a 650 kilo cow, if I'm predicting that she's going to eat 1.5% of her body weight on a dry matter basis, that's equal to 9.75 kilos. Multiply that by the 10 megajoules of energy that's in that silage. That means she's going to eat 97.5 megajoules of energy when she only needs 75. So if she has a 10 ME silage fed ad lib, basically to her leisure, however much she can eat, it's in front of her all the time, she's going to eat far more than she needs. So that's how you can end up with cows in quite a fit condition just before calving if you've just been too good to her, and that can lead to other difficulties at calving. So things you can do to reduce the amount of energy she's getting from her silage is to restrict her intake or add in a low energy feed, for example straw, to try and reduce the amount of energy. The other thing I wanted to explain was the changing dry matter effect. So in my previous example, I just used an average dry matter of 25%, and she was having to eat 30 kilos. If I increase the dry matter of the silage, if it was higher dry matter, like a bale silage tends to be drier, it'll mean she'll require to eat less because there's more energy in a smaller quantity because there's more dry matter, less water. In a lower dry matter silage, say the silage was cut on quite a wet day, it's quite a wet silage, then she's going to need to eat more of that to get the same amount of energy. So the little table at the bottom there, I've tried to just explain those two steps again. So step 1, working out how much kilos of dry matter, 75 divided by my 10 megajoules, so same amount of energy in the silage. In step 2, on a high dry matter silage, so my bale silage, for example, which is 35% dry matter, it's working out at 7.5 multiplied by my 100 divided by 35 is equal to 21 kilos. So she's having to eat 9 kilos less on a high dry matter silage. On a lower dry matter silage that's a bit wetter, I've said 20% as an example, she's having to eat 37.5 kilos of fresh weight of silage. So it's quite a big difference. If I was to feed her as if it was an average silage, I might actually not feed her enough, and I could be restricting her intake without meaning to. So that's why it's important to get an analysis and know what your dry matter is. Particularly in grass silage, that's the thing that varies the most year on year. So I've got another poll question. Question number 3 is, which of these feeds provides 10 megajoules of energy? The first one is 1.5 kilos of hay, 1 kilo of barley, or 6 kilos of carrots, or all 3. So I'm just going to share this poll. Hopefully you'll be able to see that again. So which of these feeds provides 10 megajoules of energy? 1.5 kilos of hay, 1 kilo of barley, 6 kilos of carrots, or all 3. I'll give you a bit of time. It's looking good. Got most people voted, just a couple more. Just give a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and then share those results. Hopefully that will come up. So 69% said all 3. A few people went for barley and even less went for hay and carrots. Well done to the majority of you, that's correct. All 3, all of these feeds contain 10 megajoules of energy. So it kind of comes back to the effect of dry matter and how they need to eat more. So 1 kilogram of barley, it's about 90% dry matter, so it's probably the driest of the three. So you only need to eat 1 kilo to get 10 megajoules. But for carrots, the majority of the carrot is probably water, so therefore they need to eat 6 kilos of carrots to provide the same amount of energy, 10 megajoules of energy, equivalent to 1 kilo of barley. So it's something to bear in mind if you're deciding to feed carrots instead of barley or supplement with a bit of carrots. The equivalent of 1 kilo of barley would be 6 kilos of carrots. I'm just going to hide that poll again. And next one is
I'll maybe just jump in there a minute, Mary. There's a question I see asking about the megajoules for cows, which just follows quite nicely on to the next question, and that was when I said 15% extra for outwintered, it's 15% on top of the calculation. So rather than another 15 megajoules, it's 15%. So we'd said, say, a 650 kilo cow. So we're taking her to 75 megajoules, so plus an additional 15% for outwintered. So adds on another, what, about 11. So that takes you up to about 86 megajoules of energy. So it's 15% onto your requirement for maintenance. And we'll just come on, I think the next slides are actually what we are in lactation and further on through the year. So that is just solely on maintenance only there.
Yeah, I just skipped back to show that slide again. Hope that was helpful. Cool, thanks, Kirsten. So this slide is just showing cattle requirements through pregnancy. Taking a 700 kilo cow in this instance, 20 weeks pre-calving, it doesn't actually increase much from her maintenance requirements yet. It's really at 8 weeks before calving, that's when it starts to really ramp up how many megajoules of energy she needs. And you can see once you get to lactation, you've jumped quite a bit from 75 megajoules at 20 weeks pre-calving all the way up to 135 megajoules. My main point I wanted to get across here was it really depends on the base of your ration. For most rations, that will be silage. So I've said depending on the quality of your silage is how to base how much of a top up of concentrate she needs. So I've given the example here of a high quality 11 megajoules of ME silage, fed ad lib. This is at lactation, point of lactation. If she was fed ad lib, that will provide around 110 megajoules. Therefore, at lactation, she needs about 1 to 2 kilos of barley just to top up the energy because she's not going to get enough just from silage alone. If I come with a poor silage analysis that's only analysed at 9 megajoules of ME, the silage, if fed ad lib, will only provide about 90 megajoules. So at lactation, she's going to need about 3 to 4 kilos of barley. So really knowing the base of your ration, your silage, having it analysed, knowing what your energy is, not just taking it as average, but really knowing how much she's going to get from the base of her ration and know how to supplement it appropriately. That's my main message from this slide, but also just to show how our energy requirements really do ramp up, especially at 2 weeks pre-calving. You want to have her on a good high plane of nutrition, especially if you've had her on quite a low energy diet to take some weight off her. Like ammonia treated straw, I would move them onto a silage, good silage based ration as you get closer to calving, just for that increase of energy requirements. And particularly into lactation. So at this point, if there's any more questions, Siobhan, this might be a good breaking point. If there's any questions on anything that's been said so far?
No, I think you can move on. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself there, so I was talking to myself. Oh. Normal.
No worries. Well, I'll pass over to Kirsten then, who's going to take us through the sheep requirements.
Yes, so I've seen there's a few questions just come in asking if the cattle was the same as the sheep. That would be far too simple and far too easy. So no, they are slightly different. So I've not actually got as many slides on the sheep. I think it's something that we could maybe revisit again, maybe pre-lambing if there was a thirst for it, because it is quite out of season now, I suppose, whereas at least the cattle, you've got autumn calvers to start thinking about. So we'll go through the sheep. So they are wonderful creatures. Since I'm a sheep person, their maintenance requirement, and this is kind of going with a 75 kilo yow, so just a general normal type of yow here, and the maintenance requirement is 11.5 megajoules a day. So it's far less than we were speaking about with cattle. So if you think 240 kilocalories per megajoule, where your 650 kilo cow was about 18,000 a day compared to a human, when we're looking at sheep, we're acting more like thinking of a human, because a 75 kilo yow is basically like a 12-stone woman. So it's quite similar, to be honest. So that's talking about maintenance. So that is through the winter, that is taking them right through tupping, that is, you know, getting them through the hard periods of the year. As we get into pregnancy, further into pregnancy, it starts to ramp up really quite hard. And the table there's a massive amount of figures in there, but we'll maybe just home in. I feel myself pointing at the screen. I know you can't see me pointing here, but if you go for the yow live weight at 70 kilos, Mary, if you can use your cursor, and if we look at about 2 lambs, so that's a 70 kilo yow with twin lambs, we can see we've got 7 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks, and 1 week. And like that's just a 7-week snapshot. And this is just at the very end of lambing. And look there, we've got the bubble is shown, we've got 11.4 megajoules. So that's as we are up above, that's kind of maintenance. And then it jumps to 13.1 at 5 weeks, and another jump at 3 weeks. And by the time we're 1 week away from lambing, we're right up at 18.3. So it's a massive, massive jump from where her requirement is. So she's basically, we're looking at maintenance, which is about 1 times, we say. And by the time that we're into later on to pregnancy, we're about 1.5 times maintenance. And then under that table, I've got lactation. So I've got lactation there for a single and lactation there for a twin. So obviously your twin bearing now is doing twice the work. She's having to produce twice the amount of milk and try and get the same weight away at weaning time. And look at the difference there. Like we're talking 11.4, 11.5 is maintenance, and we're jumping to double the amount for a single at 22.5 megajoules of energy. And then it's actually 3 times that for a twin yow. So it's a massive, massive jump. And the yow, like pre-lambing, she copes amazingly. She's the only animal that actually produces something that is more fat than 5% of her actual weight. Think of a human, think of a cow, think of a rat, think of an elephant. They all produce about 5% of their weight. But a yow, when she's having twins or triplets, it's a huge amount of her weight. That's why she needs all this energy. So it's really, really important to get the energy into the yow. The next slide.
Kirsten, sorry, just before you move on, somebody's asked about a Hebridean. So maybe going back to your table, a Hebridean ewe would probably be maybe not even 50 kilos, but do the same principles apply?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So it's not quite 50 kilos. Arguably, when she's in pregnancy, she possibly is though, you know, because she's going to have the fetuses there. So, but basically, you can kind of see there's a sliding scale going with the weight of the yow. This table is actually available in the HDB. I've done a fantastic booklet all about nutrition, and that table is in there. So it gives you loads of different weights. It'll take it up to 80, 90 kilos. So it's just a sliding scale. The smaller the yow, the less is required. So likes of your 70 kilo yow there with twins, 7 weeks, 11.4, your 50 kilo yow, 8.8. So it's the same with what we're speaking about with the cow. You know, the smaller the animal is, the less energy requirement that she has.
Thank you.
Okay. So on to our next slide. We spoke about the cow and how much the cow eats. And it's quite similar for the sheep. Again, it's not the same, just to keep us all on our toes. but we look at how much she's going to eat to work out actually how much silage is she going to eat, and then you know your quality of the silage, and then you can work out how much you actually need to supplement her to make sure that you're getting the energy into her. So this table here is just, we're showing a good silage. I totally appreciate that not everybody can make a super duper silage, but I'm just using this as an example. So, you know, you can factor in however you like. So this is looking at a good silage, about 10.5 ME. So as Mary spoke about earlier, that's metabolized energy. She's going to eat to appetite of about 1.6% of her body weight. So on the right hand side, I've got my calculation, 1.6% of 70 kilos equals 1.12 kilos of dry matter. So this isn't fresh, this is dry matter that we're working out. I'm using that 1.12 and I'm timesing it by the amount of energy in that silage. So that's by the 10.5. So I can see after that very, very simple calculation that she is actually, if she eats to appetite, if she's got access and she can get into wherever, you know, if it's a ring feed or however it is being fed, then she'll be gaining, or she'll be getting 11.8 megajoules a day. So we know that at 7 weeks pre-lambing, her requirement is 11 megajoules. So there's no need to supplement that yow. She's getting everything she needs from that silage. So there's no need to start feeding then when any extra energy isn't required. Next down in the table, we're looking at 5 weeks pre-lambing, and again, she's jumping up in the amount of energy she requires. So she's at 13 megajoules of energy now. So just the same, like we've already worked out how much silage. So the silage is given 11.8 megajoules. She needs 13. So very simply, 13 minus 11.8, and it comes up that the requirement there is 1.2. So I'm taking the 1.2 and dividing it by 10.75. And the reason I'm coming to 10.75 is most feed or cake or concentrate or whatever you call it that's bought in a bag or a ton bag, that's the dry matter of that is 10.75. So I'm just taking my 1.2 requirement, dividing it by the dry matter in the feed, and that's meaning that she is only requiring 0.11 kilos of concentrate to get to that 13 megajoules. So it's a very, very small amount of feed. Going at 1 week pre-lambing, my calculation looks a little bit more confusing, but I promise you it's not. And it's just because her appetite is changing. There's less room. She's got all this lamb, she's got all this mass pushing her belly further into her body, so she just doesn't have the same room in her stomach. So we're looking at about 1.4% of her body weight rather than 1.6% of her body weight. Her energy is bigger, so she's got 18 megajoules of energy requirement. So my calculation this time is the 1.4 of her appetite. So she is 1.4 times 70 kilos is 0.98 kilos of dry matter. We know what's in her silage, so I'm using my 0.98 times 10.5 ME, and that's telling me how many megajoules she's getting from that silage. So 18 minus that is showing that that diet is actually at a deficit of 7.71. So she's needing extra energy. She's needing help. So we're taking our 7.71 megajoules that she needs. We're dividing it by the dry matter of the feed, which is 10.75, and we're seeing that she needs 0.71 kilos of concentrate. So I don't want to get into this stepped up flat rate. What do I do? Because it's not lambing time just now. And if I go down there, you will have forgotten by the time we get to lambing time. But it's just showing the importance of when that requirement increases and when she needs extra energy, and when she maybe doesn't need the extra energy, where you could maybe save costs at the 7 weeks pre-lambing and where it's really, really needed closer to lambing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kirsten, I think your 10.75 there, you'd said that was the dry matter of the concentrate. I think you meant that was the energy of the concentrate on a fresh weight. So it's the 7.71 energy gap divided by the amount of energy from the concentrate. Normally it would be on a label in dry matter terms, but that's just expressed on fresh weight. Sorry.
So it's very, very simple calculations that once you kind of get the grasp of how to do it, it's very simple to do. Just looking at actual pasture. So just now, hopefully most people have finished lambing or getting to the end of lambing for your own sanity. But what actual requirements? We spoke about needing 2 times their maintenance pretty much just now in lactation, or 3 times maintenance. So how much do you actually get from the grass? Because most cows are at grass. Depending where you are in the country, it's either very much needing a drink and it's not growing too well, or there's plenty of grass. So this is just kind of looking at 3 different types of grass. So we've got a poor quality grass over on the right hand side. You can see a lot of dead material in there. That kind of yellowy type of grass, that's stuff that's probably been left there through the winter. It's died back. It's not really letting any new growth get in there. It's not letting any sunlight get in there. And the energy of grass like that in that sort of poor quality state, that is under 8 megajoules of energy. Your moderate quality grass, so it's quite stocky. It doesn't have a lot of body to it, but it's grown away. And that quite stemmy kind of moderate quality, that's about 10.5 megajoules of energy. And then the best stuff over on the left hand side, the optimal quality, you see it's a lovely sward of grass here, loads of clover, a lovely fresh bite, a lot of new growth coming in there, and that's your high energy grass. So that's your 11.5 megajoules. So your poorer quality, if yows have just lambed, remember I said at the start that peak milk yield is about 3 weeks. After that, it starts tailing off. So up to that 3 weeks, it's trying to give them the best quality grass to get that energy to produce that milk for them. If the grass isn't so good, it's more the poor quality end, you can start to look at, right, what can I supplement them? Can I give them a root, say like swedes or fodder beet or something just to supplement it? Or if it's not coming away, you can even think about supplementing with creep feed or something. So just having a look at that grass just very much lets you assess what's happening. And I spoke about looking at condition, and condition tells you a lot about what's happening with nutrition. You're going to have the lambs in to give them a heptavac, a worm probably quite soon. A great time just to put your hand over some yows and actually feel the condition and see if the grass is doing what you think it is or should be doing.
Great. Just going to finish off on all the terms used in nutrition. So the last one I wanted to cover was crude protein. So it might be something you've seen on a silage analysis before or displayed on a feed label. I put in a little example here of one of our silage analysis and circled crude protein in that big red bubble. But the reason it's called crude protein, it's actually a measure of the nitrogen and the average nitrogen content of amino acids, hence crude. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So it's that nitrogen content of these building blocks in the protein. It's then broken down into different types of protein. So it might have been something that you've read before about rumen degradable protein and digestible undegradable protein. Protein nutrition can get a little bit complex. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible just to explain these 2 different terms. The first one is rumen degradable protein. So this is the kind of protein that the rumen bugs need to function and thrive. So it makes up most of the protein requirements of a ruminant, unless they're quite a high production animal. Said, for example, they're a ewe in late pregnancy or a high yielding dairy cow. So some examples of sources of rumen degradable protein are urea. Urea is probably the prime example because it's all rumen degradable protein. Grass silage as well is very high in rumen degradable protein, and rapeseed meal, distillers grains, and soybean meal as well. So this little diagram at the bottom, hopefully you can see it okay. It's a snapshot of what I showed you at the first slide, so the overview of the rumen. I put in my rumen bugs that are in there digesting this degradable protein. So the feed comes in, we'll say urea, for example, comes in, degradable protein. The degradable protein here, the rumen bugs also require energy to be able to use that degradable protein, and they turn it into what's called microbial protein, and that's the protein that goes to the animal. So that's what makes ruminants so special. They're able to do what we can't. They can utilize things like grass and urea, these non-protein nitrogen compounds. They're able to utilize that in a way that we can't to make protein, these high quality proteins. So they need rumen degradable protein in order to function. But the other thing to remember is that they also need an energy source as well. So it's all about matching the energy to the protein. So if I was to feed straight urea, I definitely would not recommend that. They wouldn't have the energy to be able to actually utilize that, so it just all go out the back end. So in a grass silage tends to be higher in protein and not enough energy. So sometimes you might need to add a bit of a supplement. Similar with grass as well, tends to be higher in protein, and energy is the limiting factor. But yeah, that's where it's degraded in the rumen itself, hence rumen degradable protein. And then in my next term, the digestible undegradable protein, or the DUP, this bypasses the rumen. I've got my little diagram again. You can see my degradable protein is used here to make microbial protein. My DUP, it comes in through the feed, but the bugs basically can't utilize it. They don't attack the DUP, so it passes on through, past the omasum, abomasum, and it's absorbed in the small intestine. So it bypasses the rumen bugs. High-producing animals require a source of DUP, as the bugs are unable to provide enough protein. So the protein from the microbial protein here, it's basically not enough for a high-yielding dairy cow or a ewe in late pregnancy. As Kirsten was saying, a ewe has a lot of strain on her towards the end of pregnancy, but wool growth, she's making colostrum, she's trying to maintain her own weight. So all those things added together, the bugs basically can't make her enough protein. So something like soybean meal, rapeseed meal, I've also said soprolin, which is just a treated form of soya. It increases the amount of DUP in the soybean meal, and it basically just gives her more of a supply of DUP, so it can be fed at a lower rate. I've also mentioned there it's good in young stock as well, as they're just starting to develop their rumen, but also their need for protein is quite high because they're still growing. So a source of DUP in the form of, for example, soybean meal, or you can also get treated rapeseed meal that's increased the level of DUP as well. So moving lastly on to evaluating the feed, the quality of feed, I'll just pass over to Kirsten again.
Okay, so this is our kind of final section for tonight. Our aim is to finish at 9, so we're not far off where we're going to be. And it was just really to look at actual feeds when you go and buy a feed, and just to assess, is it any good? Which one should I buy? You've got a quote for 2, which one do you go for? So here's just some, again, really quite simple things that are quite easy to take home and remember. So we look at oil. So we look for oil to be about between 4 and 5%. And we look for ash to be under 10%. So that one gives you quite a good telltale about the kind of minerals. So if it's really, really low, you tend to think, well, there's not a lot of minerals in there, but you're really looking for it to be about under 10%. Fibre, you're looking for that to be under 10%. If that's over 10%, it kind of shows you that there's something in that feed that is really not the best energy. It's kind of highlights it's a really, always never fails that there's something in there that isn't just giving you that energy that you require. Crude proteins, that's as required, so it depends what you're feeding. So if you're feeding in lamb yows, you're looking for 18%. If it's cows, you know, whatever it is you're feeding, that will be different. We look at the list of ingredients, and really looking at the lists, you're trying to look at either the first 3 or first 5 ingredients that are on there. They're always shown as like in the amount there is. So the first ingredient you see, say it's barley, then that is the biggest ingredient that's in there, and then it kind of ascends as you go down. So molasses, you look to be about 2 to 5%. You don't want that too high up the list. Yes, it's energy, but it's very sticky energy. So if that's higher, or if it's further up the list, then that can sometimes tell you that the ingredients are maybe not the best ingredients, but they're stuck together, or they're hidden in kind of gloop. So this kind of real snapshot of things on the screen there gives you a really, really good telltale of what to look for in a feed label.
Yeah, just to say that it's not a legal requirement for the feed company to state what the energy level is. So these are good things to go by, just to give a gauge. But if they're a good company and you ask them, they should give you the ME level of the feed. And if they don't, then you can question why they maybe aren't.
So we've got a table here, and this is just to kind of guide you to what would be good high energy feeds and what wouldn't be so good. So the first one there, the first two in fact, they're abbreviated. So that's maize dark grains and wheat dark grains. Everything else should make sense to what they are. And then you've got your energy along the side. So we're really seeing anything in green is basically a good energy source, and anything in red isn't so good. So if you're looking at your label and say your second ingredient you see is oat feed, then straight away you can see, this isn't actually the best feed here. It's a very poor energy. It's about 6 megajoules of energy compared to your maize dark grains there that are about 14 energy. So this is something really handy if you take a picture maybe of this slide, because it's a very good one to have when you're looking at feeds. So I think we've got 2 feeds now. So this first feed, I want you to have a look at some of the ingredients here. Think what we said about the oils, where we're looking between like 4 and 5%. We were looking at the fibre to be under 10, and we were looking at the ash to be under 10. So you'll think to yourself, what's going on with this feed? And as I said, the ingredients are in descending order. So wheat is the biggest ingredient there, and your trace elements and vitamins are the last one there. So quite quickly, I'm sure you're thinking, would I buy this one, would I not? Here's label 2. So again, crude oil, we're looking between 4 and 5%, fibre under 10, ash under 10, and we're looking at our ingredients. So I think you've got a poll, Mary, haven't you?
Yeah.
To see which one would you pick. So we've had label 1 and label 2. So we'll just run a quick poll to see which feed you would pick from that very quick look at the different feeds.
This is looking promising. People have
Very promising.
people have taken something in. Yep. Okay, I'll just close it now and launch it. Just aware of time. And just share the results.
So results. The majority of people are going with feed 1. That's the exact feed that I would have gone for, and like that was a very quick look at it, and you've made that kind of assumption. So it's really worthwhile doing. Speaking to Siobhan the other day, who's now off the camera, she had said that she'd gone into her local feed distributor in the midst of coronavirus, where you can't get in, and it asked for 3 feeds to be dragged out of the store so she could look at the labels, so she could decide. And again, really worthwhile, wasn't it for you, Siobhan?
Absolutely, yes, because the price didn't tell you. The price would have made you think, a bit like Marks and Spencer's, that one was better than the other, but it definitely wasn't.
So just looking at the labels, like you obviously got the grasp of what was going on. The first label had wheat as a front runner, so that's obviously very high energy. It had distiller's dark grains, it had barley, so it had all the good ingredients at the start. The second one, the first ingredient was wheat feed, which isn't the best of energy, and then it had screen palm kernel, which is very low energy, low palatability. And then it was really on to the third ingredient, distiller's dark grains, before we actually see something that's a really good ingredient in there. Looking further through it, and your ultra soy is your kind of DUP ingredient in there, and it is really quite far down the list. It's after calcium carbonate, and there's not going to be a lot of calcium carbonate in there, so that very quickly tells you it's not the best energy feed, and it's probably not the best if this is a yow feed for feeding pre-lambing. So that's just kind of some quick things to look at in there. We've just got, just for you to have a think really now of, you know, just get your head into the energy. So we've got higher or lower, there's no poll here, just think it to yourselves. So we've got maize distillers dark grains and we've got barley, higher or lower. So the maize distillers dark grains, that was at the very top of the graph that we showed earlier on. That was the highest energy ingredient that we had. So that's about 14 megajoules of ME. Your barley is also a very good feed. It's about 13.2 megajoules. So your maize distillers dark grains are highest there. Next up, we've got soybean meal and we've got oats. So we know that soybean meal is extremely great for protein, great for DUP, like Mary was speaking about earlier. It's actually very good for energy as well. It's 13.4 energy, so it's a really good supply too. Oats, they're about 12, so your soybean meal would take the highest energy there. Finally, we've got soya hulls and flaked maize. So the soya hulls, they're about 12, whereas your flaked maize is 13.8 to 14. So your flaked maize would take it there. And that is 9 o'clock. Siobhan, do you want to?
Well, yes, I was going to, we've got a few questions in. So somebody has asked about soya. If they didn't want to use soya because it was imported, then what other sources of DUP are there?
As I said with that slide, there is also rapeseed meal is probably the second highest. It's not as high as soya. Soya is really the highest that you'll get. But there are things on the market now where they've got protected rapeseed meal. Some different feed companies have started selling different products that basically have increased the level of DUP by protecting the rapeseed meal. So it's actually equivalent to soya. And I think depending on the feed company, they may be homegrown rapeseed meal as well. So that's an alternative potentially.
That's great, thank you. And another question was on, somebody has an SAC silage analysis and they're asking, would it be crude protein that's listed on that or protein?
It'll be crude protein on that, yeah. All of the SAC silages go for what's called NIR, so it's basically a big scanner, and the grass silage just goes through it and is scanned by this scanner, and that gives you the crude protein.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, well, we're at 9 o'clock, so I'd like to say thanks to everybody for listening in. Thank you to Mary, thank you to Kirsten. I thought that was a really good explanation of the basics of nutrition. We've got quite a few questions that have come in that we'll try and answer by email afterwards, and we'll also make the presentation available. There's also lots of resources available on the Farm Advisory Service website, so if you haven't had a look at that, take a look there because there's a wealth of information, and that's found at fas.scot. So thanks very much for listening in. Thank you for the questions, and we will use your questions to say what to do on their next webinar on nutrition. So thank you very much, everyone.